Hey guys, welcome to the fifth seminar series in the Relation series with Ajax. Before we do start, I'd just like to acknowledge traditional owners of the land that I'm currently on. I'm here in Bourbon Q, in the land of the Wurundjeri people. I pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that to the lands that you're currently on at the moment, that wherever you are across Victoria, and pay respect to elders past and present. But I also like to extend that to the lands where you may have grown up on, because that could be somewhere completely different than you are now. I want to pay respect to your elders past and present, because that helps shape who you became today. For people that don't know me, my name's AJ Williams. My background's Wiradjuri and Watchabullock. I'm an Aboriginal man who is a trained nurse, social worker, youth worker. And I've been working with Ajax as their cultural consultant for the last nearly 2-3 years, and currently one of their reconciliation ambassadors, which were appointed last month. Tonight we've actually got a very special guest speaker coming in, Kath Healy from VACCA. VACCA, she'll explain in more detail, but is the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency, and I'm not going to introduce. I've got a little briefing on Kath, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. So I'm just going to throw straight over to Kath and welcome you tonight to the 5th seminar series.
Thank you, AJ, and good evening, everybody. As AJ said, my name's Kath Healy. I'm the Senior Education Advisor with the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency. Before I begin, I would also like to, oh, I'm not getting slide transition all of a sudden. Just, sorry, everybody. There we go. I'd also like to acknowledge the lands of the traditional owners that we all gather on this evening. I'm on Wurundjeri country this evening, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to pay my deepest respect to my Aboriginal colleagues that I work alongside at VACCA, and also to the children, families and carers that we work with through our many programs and services at VACCA. This is an overview of what I'd like to talk about this evening. I'm really happy to take questions at the end. Please use the chat while I'm sharing different aspects of our organisation with you. And AJ is going to monitor the chat. So I'm really happy to take questions at any point. So I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to VACCA and then have a little bit of a talk about why we do the work that we do. I'm going to touch on government policies and initiatives that support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in the 0 to 5 space. And I understand you've had presentations from other Aboriginal peak bodies over the last few seminars. So you may hear some of those things again. And then I'm also going to talk about the early childhood supports and services that we provide to children, families and carers at VACCA. So just to begin with, I'm going to play you a short video where our CEO, Auntie Muriel Bamblett, gives a quick overview of what our organisation does. I think it's always best to hear it from the top. So I'm going to play this. It goes for about 4 minutes.
VACCA is a child and family welfare organisation established over 40 years ago by Auntie Molly Dyer, and is really about the preservation and strengthening of Aboriginal children and families and keeping children connected to their culture. The numbers of children in out-of-home care are significantly high, greater overrepresentation, a lot of vulnerable families, a lot of traumatised children that are in a system that doesn't understand Aboriginal culture. So it's really important that we have organisations that are about keeping children safe, working with families to get children home, and we offer the best services to Aboriginal children and families. VACCA's grown. We were an organisation that was predominantly about placing children, removing children. We've now grown to an organisation where we're much stronger in putting children back into their home. We run playgroups, we run early intervention, parenting programs, stronger programs. We run residential care services. So we run the full continuum of programs for children and families in the out-of-home care system. And the biggest gain for us is when we see children go back home.
Because the playgroup actually involves young children, we actually use the word know and belong. The first one is Nagal, which is belong, and also Nadaji, yes, which means know. With our Aboriginal children and Torres Strait Islander children, that they actually belong to the community and they know where they come from.
They have put cultural relevance on the child protection out-of-home care agenda, and their advocacy work has been second to none. And then in their service delivery, they've been creative, they've got multiple programs, they've engaged with carers, they've engaged with communities, they've engaged with the kids.
I think it's important that Aboriginal people, given our over-representation, given the history of removal and the numbers of children that have been placed in institutions, and now we've got second, third generation of children. We've got 5 generations of children that we've dealt with within out-of-home care. We've got to break the cycle of removal. Too many of our children end up in juvenile justice, criminal justice. Too many die too young, too many are in family violence, drug and alcohol. So it's really important that we break that cycle.
I think the thing about VACCA's governance is that they've spent a lot of time recording it and educating people on why they run an internal structure the way they do. There's a deep attachment within it to Aboriginal culture and heritage. It influences everything they do and the style of how they go about things as a cooperative, nevertheless developing a very clear board structure and a strong place for the CEO and a good linkage between that and the kind of programs they develop.
We've gone through an accreditation process and we met 5 categories of those 8 areas exceedingly. So I think Aboriginal services are doing well. I think the Indigenous Governance Awards are important. They send a message about the importance of good governance, but also about the role of reconciliation in promoting the best interests of our people more broadly.
I come to organisations like VACCA and I think, could we survive without these organisations? And I think the answer to that is no.
So a little bit of the history about how VACCA was first established. So in the 60s and 70s, there was a groundswell of activism in the fight for self-determination. And there were 2 organisations that were established. VARS, as we call it, the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service, and VALS, the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. In 1972, VARS founders held a special meeting at 99 King Street, Melbourne, to discuss plans for the establishment of a VARS building. VARS began to service the community from 229 Gertrude Street, Fitzroy. In 1979, VARS moved to a larger property at Gertrude Street, Fitzroy. Due to the lack of funding, VARS staff worked without pay for 4 months to ensure the continuation of the health service. The Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service was established in 1973 as a community-controlled cooperative society. Prior to the establishment of VACCA, the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service first began advocating for change for Aboriginal children and families. From the early 1970s, VALS appeared for Aboriginal children in the Children's Court. VALS began to highlight urgent concerns about what they were seeing in the system regarding Aboriginal children being removed from their families. Sorry, I'm still having some technical difficulties, AJ. Being removed from their families 18 to 20 times higher than other Australian children. Being victims of non-Aboriginal adoption. Numerous foster care breakdowns. Being placed in institutions. The Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service wanted to find placement alternatives and support within the Victorian Aboriginal community. VALS further identified that 90% of its clients in criminal matters had been removed from their families as children. They'd also been victims of failed adoptive and foster care arrangements, and it meant that many of these young people were homeless and, more importantly, unaware of who they really were or where their families came from. As a result of lobbying, the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service was founded to operate a hostel for clients in need of emergency and crisis accommodation. When talking about how VACCA does its work, we must recognise that VACCA is an ACO, so it's an Aboriginal community controlled organisation. The definition of an Aboriginal community controlled organisation is the local Aboriginal community having control of issues that directly affect their community, meaning that Aboriginal people must determine and control the pace, shape, and manner of change and decision-making at all levels. At VACCA, that means that our organisational structure empowers local communities in making decisions for the communities that we work with. VACCA membership and board consists of Aboriginal community members only, and our board ensure that we are answerable to the community. So now I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about VACCA's current strategic plan, which was launched this year and will take us through to 2025. So our vision, Aboriginal self-determination, live, experience, be, and our purpose, supporting culturally strong, safe and thriving Aboriginal communities. There are a number of principles and values that underpin our strategic plan, including respect, excellence, self-determination, healing and empowerment, the best interests of the child, and Aboriginal cultural observance. VACCA is the lead or peak body in Aboriginal child and family welfare in Victoria. It's the largest Aboriginal organisation countrywide. We have various regional offices. We have 3 offices at Preston, 2 offices in the south at Dandenong and Frankston, 1 in the east at Chirnside Park, 2 offices in the west at Werribee and Melton, and 3 regional offices located at Wangaratta, Wodonga and Morwell. Across all of these locations, we now have over 800 staff. I heard today that we're nearly at 900 staff. So it's a huge organisation that's grown from only 30 staff in the early days to now almost 900 staff. And we offer approximately 70 different programs and services. The staffing ratio of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal staff at VACCA is about 50-50. So now I just want to have a little bit of a talk about some of the things that we know have impacted or had huge impact on Aboriginal communities. And in order to understand and engage in a culturally responsive way when we're working with Aboriginal children, their families or carers in their communities, it's really important that we understand the impacts of colonisation on these communities. Before colonisation throughout Australia, there was 250 plus individual nations and an estimated population of 750,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The land and the spirituality are the foundations on which Aboriginal culture has been built. Both are the key determinants of Aboriginal culture, traditions, customs, and complex belief systems. Extensive knowledge of environment. For 60,000 years, Aboriginal people sustained and lived off the land through the passing down of knowledge of the environment and how to care for it. Kinship and social structures. Aboriginal communities were built on highly structured, developed kinship networks. These complex systems formed the social structure of a tribe and described the relationships for each other, roles, responsibilities, and community obligations. Children knew who they were in relationship to their family, their kin, their people, and their environment. These relationships give meaning to a child's identity by defining how they were connected to everyone and everything in their life. Traditional law. Law is connected to the dreaming. It governs all aspects of traditional life and provides rules on how to interact with the land, kinship, and community. There was a strict adherence to this law and punishments applied if breached or broken. Language and ceremony. All of this cultural knowledge, tradition, and wisdom was passed down through thousands of generations, either orally, through storytelling or song, or through art, dance, and ceremonies. Colonisation resulted dispossession and almost complete destruction of the oldest continuous living culture in the world. And so this is the system that was strong for Aboriginal communities pre-colonisation. As a result of the 1995 National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission published the Bringing Them Home report and tabled it to the Australian Federal Parliament on the 26th of May, 1997. This report highlighted the key findings of the inquiry, put forward 54 recommendations for Parliament, concluded that Indigenous families and communities have endured gross violations of their human rights. These violations continue to affect Indigenous people's lives daily. They are an act of genocide aimed at wiping out Indigenous families, communities, and cultures, vital to the precious and unalienable heritage of Australia. And the three key effects of the stolen generation on Aboriginal families today, these are the effects that are still being felt through intergenerational trauma. Number one, separation from primary carers. Number two, Aboriginal parenting skills are undermined and their children are at risk of being removed. Number three, loss of culture and connection. I'm just going to show you another brief clip which comes from the Healing Foundation, and it gives a really good explanation of the effects of intergenerational trauma.
The story of our communities, people, and nation starts a long, long time ago. More than 60,000 years, in fact. This was when our culture and our law first started to thrive.
Kath, we can't see that.
We knew who we were and where we belonged.
You can't see it?
No.
Oh. I'm not sure why, because it's on my screen and I'm still sharing my screen.
Have you had to open a new browser to share this video, Kath?
Yes. Yes.
So you need to reshare your screen. So you have to stop sharing and then reshare the new screen.
Right. Thank you, and apologies, everybody.
If you have a problem, Kath, I've got the video here with me as well.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Wonderful.
The story of our communities, people and nation starts a long, long time ago. More than 60,000 years, in fact. This was when our culture and our law first started to thrive. We knew who we were and where we belonged. We took care of each other, our land and our waters. We ate food that made us healthy, lived on country and abided by our laws and song lines. Our families, our children were happy, with strong minds and hearts, because they were where they belonged. But then, everything changed.
Colonization came, bringing wars, disease, famine, violence, and the destruction and violation of our cultural laws, sacred sites, families, and communities.
We were denied our knowledge, language, ceremonies, and identity, the very things that tell us who we are and where we belong. And our connections with each other and the land grew weak.
And then, our children were taken from us. They had their names changed and their identities stripped away. They were told that Aboriginal people were bad. Worse still, they were told that their parents and grandparents did not want them.
For years this happened, and those children became known as the stolen generations.
Our children were denied love and experienced physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. This left very deep, very complex, and very real wounds, leaving scars that are still being felt personally, socially, spiritually, and collectively.
In the time when our story started, we were able to parent in the cultural way that has seen our families survive and thrive for generations. Our people were strong, and our culture flowed and healed us in times of hurt.
But since the trauma of colonization and the stolen generations, we have not been able to heal in the same way. And we have unknowingly passed this trauma on to our children through sharing our sad stories and having them witness and experience our pain. This is known as intergenerational trauma, and we see symptoms today in broken relationships, disconnected families, violence, suicide, and drug and alcohol abuse.
But this is not where our story ends. We still have strong minds and hearts, and we still know who we were and where we belong. By creating safe and strong communities together, supporting our families to be free from pain, returning to our culture and building a strength of identity, we can stop the cycle of trauma and bring about positive intergenerational change so that we can continue to thrive for the next 60,000 years. There are simple things that we can all do to help heal our trauma.
Visit healingfoundation.org.au to find out more.
Before I continue, that might be a good point to just have a brief break from my speaking and hear from some of you. I'm thinking some of you might be thinking about your work in early childhood and how having a greater understanding of intergenerational trauma informs the work that you do, or ways that you might be able to engage with families through your services. Feel free to pop something in the chat.
Does anyone want to say anything at the moment? Come on, guys, don't be scared.
They're a quiet group.
Yeah, they're not normally this quiet.
I know when I first started out as a teacher early in my career, one of the things that I learned very early on was the importance of relationships when I was working with Aboriginal communities in the Northern Territory, and for the families to know me and trust me and to be able to feel that their children were safe and were happy when they came to school was paramount for me to be able to move to that next step of teaching. So that's one example. What about you, AJ? You might have an example.
I'm big on just truth telling, making sure that people understand the true history and the impact that has on people today. Some people might watch that video you've just shown and think, you know, stolen generations were things that happened 100 years ago, but it actually happened to the elders in our community and people my age and myself, rather than, and that can be a shock for some people, understanding the recency of how, as I said, how recent these issues are. And because it's much more recent, that trauma has been, as it showed in the video, has been put onto our kids and our grandkids who are still in that system now, today. Yeah. So it is about truth telling.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I've heard colleagues at VACCA talk to me about in terms of their own parenting is feeling judged, having that feeling of, I wonder if my child's lunchbox will be checked today. So there's these feelings are still felt within the community, even though for that colleague of mine, you know, you might think, well, she doesn't have to worry about that. She actually feels that. She still carries that because that was a fear that her parents had when she was growing up. Is that someone speaking?
I was just going to add, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm actually president of AJEC, so thank you for today. It's lovely. But I think what I think is just great about like the video and these sessions is helping educators understand it's okay to ask the questions and that we don't always get it right and that there's so much learning. I mean, one of the greatest things I've learned from AJ is to do your acknowledgement from the heart, like to it's not always going to sound perfect. And so I thought that was just the thing that I wanted to add, is that I'm loving learning that sometimes you have to ask. And as an educator, I'm passionate about family-centered practice. And I think that applies to every family. When they come in, every family needs to feel welcome and not judged about what's in a lunchbox, and to have the conversation with them and say, you know, like, how do they want to address their culture and what part would they like it to play? So, oh, have we lost you?
No, I'm sorry.
So yeah, that was all I was going to add.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. As a non-Indigenous person, it's a learning journey, isn't it? And it's so true to ask the questions, and that's great, AJ, that you're encouraging your colleagues through AJEX to do that.
Yeah, I always say no question in this format is a stupid question to ask. It would rather have these conversations here in this forum where people can learn, rather than not sort of mess it up in community. But and Kathy, you'll agree with me that, you know, the majority of Aboriginal people, we love sharing our culture. If we're asked respectfully, if people are willing to listen, and we don't get judged on what we actually do say.
That's right. That's so true. Any other comments or thoughts?
Can I ask you a question? Do you have the statistics at the moment about how many Aboriginal kids are currently in care?
I don't have them off the top of my head, but I can certainly get those for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to know.
Yeah. I know about this time last year, VACCA was supporting approximately 400 children living in out-of-home care.
Yeah.
But I believe those numbers have gone up for us as an organisation, but there are many other organisations that work with child protection with children in out-of-home care, not just VACCA. So there are Aboriginal children who non-Aboriginal community service organisations will be supporting.
Yeah.
I think someone put their hand up. I just saw a little message. I'm not sure who it was. Please.
I did, and apologies everyone, I can't access my camera, hence I was late as well, so apologies. I did want to ask Catherine whether that video, I had a look on your social media page, is that available anywhere to share? I just think it's such a...
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, it's a really heartfelt and very very user friendly, and I wondered whether that's available anywhere.
It is. So can you see the URL there? It's on the Healing Foundation's website.
Yes, gotcha.
So even if you just put healingfoundation.org.au in your browser,
no
it'll come up.
I will do. I just wanted to also check that's okay to do that.
Of course. It's a great video, isn't it? Okay, I might keep going. And no other comments or questions? I think there are some messages in the chat, AJ. Can you see those?
They're mainly people just saying how brilliant the movie is.
Oh, good.
Some people have shared the movie with their pre-service teachers at the university.
Yeah.
It's reassuring that trauma can heal, and we are all part of that, part of the healing.
Yeah.
I've used the video within the primary and ECE pre-service teachers. The ACHOs and KESOs do, but there is a lot of won't get it right. We have them learn an acknowledgement so it isn't tokenistic and share books. Are there case studies that speak to illustrate success? Shadowing people how to seem simplistic and certainly needs contextual cautions, but just one. That's a good question.
I think it's a great question. I failed to mention at the start too, so I've been at VACCA since the end of January, so I'm still very much learning about the organisation. But one of the things that we've been doing is working with the Lookout Centres who support kids in out-of-home care through their education journey. And we've started to document some case studies to use those as a basis to build workforce capacity within our organisation. So we have started to document some case studies. I'm not aware of case studies external to our organisation or how they might even be shared, but it's a really good question. Because I think case studies really give us those real life examples and lived experience of professionals too. I think it's very powerful to share such experiences. Maybe that's something through AJEX. You could, you know, a sharing of practice forum around this topic, that could be great. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about a relatively new framework that's being implemented across our organisation. It's called Cultural Therapeutic Ways. And it's really important because it guides our way of working across the organisation. It brings together theories of self-determination and trauma with culture to outline individual families so that they can understand what to expect from our organisation, but also for our staff to know what to expect when working for VACCA. So it's like a, I guess, a guiding sort of statement that will sit across all of our programs and services at VACCA. The image is the possum skin cloak, which was designed by Emma Bamblett, one of our staff members who's also an artist, and it represents the wrapping around kind of effective services to support families and communities together. The possum skin cloak is known as yinga, which is a Wemba word for this way. And at the moment, we have a team at VACCA who are working with all of our divisions and our services and programs to gradually implement this across our service. I'm just going to touch on three government policies or strategies that underpin the work that we do, especially at VACCA in the education space, which I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. So the first one is the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Early Childhood Strategy. Many of you may have already seen this document, but just in case you haven't, it's a really great document. I think if you just want to get your head around some of the things that are happening in early childhood for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, it's an evidence-based framework, and it gathers together practice and stories of what works for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children across Australia, and it aligns very closely with the outcomes and direction of the Closing the Gap initiative. It has 5 major goals that it focuses on, and I thought I'd just quickly read those to you because I think they'll resonate with your work. So the first one is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are born healthy and remain strong. The second one, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are supported to thrive in their early years. Number 3, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are supported to establish and maintain strong connections to culture, country and language. Number 4, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children grow up in safe, nurturing homes supported by strong families and communities. And number 5, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, families and communities are active partners in building a better service system. Co-design has become a big part of services that are being developed for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities for obvious reasons. You can't create services and supports without asking the recipients of that service and support if it's going to meet their needs. The strategy aligns with achieving the National Agreement on Closing the Gap outcomes, and it supports Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and the community controlled services to lead the responses to children's needs. So it's really about, again, about self-determination and Aboriginal community organisations running these services and providing these supports to their families, which is a huge shift. AJ, any comments from you on that? I think you, having worked in this space for a long time, would see that as a huge shift.
I just missed the last question. The cat just meowing. I just stepped out of the room for 1 second.
Okay. No, I was just saying that this strategy really highlights, things like co-design, Aboriginal community controlled organisations leading service delivery. So there's a really big impetus in this space at the moment. I just asked, were you aware of that as well?
Yeah, it has been a real change in focus, and I think this is going to be expanded upon with our new government as well. Absolutely with Linda Burney in charge of Indigenous Affairs, who is very community controlled, is very community orientated. That's very looking at closing the gap. And I always remind people that the government has set the next 40 years to close some of these gaps, and we're starting to see small improvements already in the last 2 years, but it still will take another 40 years for those gaps to actually be closed.
Yeah, and I assume when you had DET present, they were able to share some data with you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So our CEO, Auntie Muriel, who you heard from earlier, is also the chair of SNAKE. They're the national voice for our children across Australia. And I'd just like to read a quote from Muriel about this strategy. Culture is not an optional extra for our children. Connection to culture is their right. Bringing our children up in their culture is the key to making sure they feel safe, loved, proud in their identity, and are able to fulfil their potential. We all know that we have that critical window for our children from conception to around age 5, where the health, learning, development and identity of children can be positively influenced and move them, and more than any other time in their life. So the next really important piece of government policy is the Early Childhood Agreement for Children in Out-of-Home Care. VACCA are a signatory to this agreement, together with that long list there of other organisations, so Department of Education, Health and Human Services, MAV, Early Learning Association Australia, VAI, and so on. And this agreement is really about ensuring that children in out-of-home care in the early childhood space, by bringing all of the key players together, have better outcomes. Participation in high quality early childhood services, we all know, makes a difference to outcomes for children's lives, especially those who are vulnerable. While children in out-of-home care are among the most vulnerable in our community, many are not accessing key early childhood services. These children are at significant risk of being more developmentally vulnerable than their peers when they start school, which can lead to poorer health and education outcomes across their life course. To improve access to services for children in out-of-home care, we need to understand and address barriers to participation and engagement. As signatories to the agreement, it's our collective responsibility to ensure these children are given all possible supports. And I can tell you, I don't have the exact figures, but I know that the participation rates for Aboriginal children out of home care for 4-year-old kinder is quite high. However, for 3-year-old kinder, it's not. So that's a space where we're really going to be doing some advocacy and also working with our case managers who work in the child protection space to ensure that children are enrolled in and receive two years of kinder before they start school. And because you've already heard from DET and VACCA, you'll be very familiar with Marang, but I think it's really important to also highlight that that underpins the work that we do in the education space at VACCA. And this is really about building and improving outcomes for Aboriginal children, but also increasing knowledge in the education space for all children and young people around Aboriginal culture. So it has that two-pronged focus. There are also a number of initiatives that support Aboriginal children 0 to 5, Koori Kids Shine, Best Start with a particular focus on Aboriginal communities, and also the Lookout Centres that are really the conduit between child protection and schools. And we've started to do some collaborative work with the Lookout Centres to support the outcomes of the partnering agreement that I just mentioned. We have a new education strategy at VACCA, and this really came out of the last 2 years of COVID. It really shone a light on the disadvantage and lack of access to education for children and young people in our services and programs at VACCA. And so an education strategy was developed last year. And in the early years, obviously that's part of the stages of education, we have a big focus on children being developmentally on track so that they start school ready. So my role at VACCA, which is a new role this year, is to oversee the implementation of this strategy from early years right through to post-school transitions. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us, lots of work, but it's a really exciting space to be working in. We run a range of family services at VACCA, and many of these services target family with children in the 0 to 5 space. So it's just to give you an idea that as well as specific early childhood programs, there's also other services that we're offering and to support families. Lots seems to be happening and momentum growing in the disability space, because what we're finding is a lot of Aboriginal children out of home care also have either undiagnosed or diagnosed disabilities. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about Koori Kids supported playgroups, because I think this is one of the programs that VACCA has delivered now for over 15 years, but it really targets in that early years space. I'm sure many of you are familiar with supported playgroups, but with the VACCA Koori Kids supported playgroups, they're unique because they are obviously culturally sensitive. And so families come along and there's culture embedded in all of the activities that the children and families participate in. The playgroup facilitators are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander professionals who are trained in early years, but also have those really important connections to the local community and to services so that families can be connected. I worked in the space of playgroups for a number of years, and supported playgroups are an incredibly powerful and probably underfunded and under-acknowledged vehicle to connect families from 0 to 3 in that space, where families can really go off the radar and not be connected, for example, with maternal and child health, be connected to and enrolled to participate in kindergarten. So they're a really, really powerful model of connection in the early years space. Before I take questions, I'd really like to read you all a story, because you're all early childhood professionals, and I thought that that's something you'd love. So I'm going to read you this story, which is called We Connect. Oh, hopefully this will work. I think it's working. Can you see that?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry, everyone. So I might just quickly stop sharing. Maybe I can take a question if there's a question, just while I get myself sorted.
Anyone got a question? I just want to go back to Lisa's statement. Do you know if VACCA are actually recording success stories?
As I said, we are, through some of the work we're doing in the Lookout, in partnership with the Lookout Centres, but I can ask that question. I can ask that question of my colleagues.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can just jot that down for me, AJ, so I don't forget.
Yeah, I'll send you an email now.
So efficient.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, because I'm going to read you all. It's probably a bit early for a bedtime story, but We Connect. So this book was written by the parents and children of Thomastown and Werribee VACCA Koori Kids playgroups. And I think it just really sums up some of the things we've been talking about this evening. We connect with each other, family to family, Burai to Burai. We connect through great memories. Our Burais will remember our time together. We connect through creativity. We make art and laugh and share. We connect for life. We'll see each other at NAIDOC events. We connect through building pride. Our Burais deserve to be proud in their culture. We're from all over, but we connect. When we go back to our kids' country, they sit on the land and are calm and content. And we connect to the country we live on with possum skins and local stories. We connect through knowing the symbols of our culture. This necklace is a gift when you go to another's country. And I'd just like to acknowledge the artists and the writers who supported the families to document their story. We Connect was created to celebrate the importance of coming together, sharing culture and passing this on to all Aboriginal children. We Connect celebrates culture, belonging and identity. We're from all over, but we connect, Burai to Burai. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and happy to open it up for a quick chat. I think we've got 10 minutes. Is that right, AJ?
Yep.
Okay.
So any questions?
Any comments or questions? Can we purchase that book? I believe so. I'll find out and get that link to AJ. It's a beautiful book, isn't it?
Yeah.
And AJ, Lisa asked in the box whether some of the previous, the DET presentation was available, and it should be on our website, but is it just for members or for everyone?
That we need to check with Alex, but every
everybody.
seminar, sorry,
Yeah.
Alex.
It's for everybody. It's
Oh,
on the reconciliation page, which is accessible to everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the last 4 have been recorded and uploaded.
I don't know if you're all familiar, there's an organisation, Yarn Strong Sister, who produce beautiful and sell beautiful resources that are by Aboriginal authors. So if you're looking for resources for your early childhood centres, they have some great resources.
Any questions? Alana, you've always got a question.
I'm just probably maybe more to do with just the relationship. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between early childhood centres and VACCA, you know, what kind of involvement you have. I'm teaching at Fed Uni now, but when I was working in early childhood centres, that would have been really helpful to have had that connection, because it was a while ago, but I was a bit, you know, it was pretty hard yakka, and the Kessos they were really struggling because they couldn't fill positions. And if you could
that's
talk
a really
bit
good
about
question.
that.
Yeah, and it's probably just good to explain. So you would know this, but obviously it's good to just explain anyway. So VAI are the peak body for education in Victoria, whereas VACCA are a service deliverer. So we have slightly different functions, and the KESO statewide workforce are, you know, DET employees, and so they sit across and support all Koori children. Whereas at VACCA, we work primarily with the children and carers who are connected through our services, whether it's out of home care or through some of our other programs. So we don't have that kind of broad, I guess, role across all organisations. But I think it's something that's really important for us to have conversations with the other organisations about. And we're beginning to work on a bit of a project where we're going to map the supports that are available, and I think it's important to make those aware as to you know, for Aboriginal families, but also organisations who are trying to connect with Aboriginal families, like you're saying, because if you don't know about those things, it's really challenging.
Yeah. Very difficult.
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
I've got a question. It's Sue here. How are you,
Hi,
folks?
Sue.
Just interested in, you know, obviously we're getting more and more children that are, you know, could be deemed as vulnerable and perhaps in you know, in out of home care, etc. Do you think COVID has made a really significant played a really significant part in that, or is it, you know, we always talk about COVID, is that a bit of a myth, do you think, or do you think it has affected the numbers?
Look, I couldn't comment on that personally. I think that, but what I can comment on is I think across the board, as you would all know, COVID's impacted the education space, whether it's early childhood or schools. As I said, I was working in a school for the last 2 years, and we had some families who, if they were not connected already, when we moved to remote learning, they were even more disconnected. So I guess for families who maybe don't have access to technology or the internet, you know, COVID has really impacted vulnerable families, I think, in a more profound way than families who have more resources available to them. Yeah.
It's really shown up those cracks, hasn't it? It's made those cracks. You know, somebody said it's exacerbated the fault lines.
That's right. And in fact, that's why the position that I'm in now was introduced to our organisation. We didn't have anyone at our organisation that was focusing, I guess, strategically across the board in terms of engagement in education. And so for VACCA as an organisation, that was a big decision. They decided we actually need some resourcing to work in the education space. We need people with education qualifications and experience who are able to work with our broader staff to ensure those connections are made. And just to give you an example, at the moment we're working with case managers who are engaging through the lookout centres. So for example, they could be contacted by an early childhood learning advisor from the lookout centre to explore whether or not children are enrolled at kindergarten, for example. And for our case managers, not only are they supporting carers who feel overwhelmed by the system and how to, you know, how they have or have not engaged, our case managers also can feel quite overwhelmed in that space as well. So even the professionals supporting the carers, it's really challenging. So we're doing some work with our case managers, a bit of 101 kind of education of what they need to know in their roles to support and advocate for children and young people. Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Everyone probably wants to go and have their dinner.
Any final comments, Catherine? Any final statement you want people to leave with tonight?
Oh, I haven't prepared a final statement, but I think it's been great to talk to you all this evening. I think that, you know, for myself as a non-Indigenous educator throughout my career, it's always been about, like AJ said, ask the questions, educate yourself, find out where to find out more, read some of those policies that I've sent through to you and links to websites. There's really valuable information there that I think will help you in your work. I wish I could learn a bit more about your work and what you're doing and if you're engaging with Aboriginal families, but we haven't got time for that this evening. But it's been great to be here, and thank you, AJ.
Thank you, Catherine. Can everyone please give, if you can, give Catherine a round of applause, even though she may not be able to hear it.
Thank you.
On there. And you've got some thank yous coming up on the screen, Catherine. Thank you.
I can see the chat now, so that's lovely.
Yeah,
thanks, everyone.
Once you drop your presentation, you can see everything. So look, once again, everyone, I want to thank everyone for tuning into these seminars. It's really important that we spread the word through the industry that these workshops are so important to give people an idea of the issues that Aboriginal families are actually facing. I love how someone said, I think it was one of the other presentations, we don't enroll students, we enroll families. And it's so important to have a good understanding of what an Aboriginal family is actually experiencing. This is the first generation of Aboriginal kids that are getting to year 12. This is the first generation of Aboriginal, 54% of the Aboriginal population is under the age of 25. They're things that we've talked about in the other previous workshops. It is so important that we start making changes in order to get early childhood right. Because I think Auntie Heather said it when Auntie Heather Kennedy was at the launch of the RAP. She said that how can we make change? The best place we can start making changes in early childhood. You know, because if we can make the change there, then the changes will hopefully go into primary school and then into high school and then into the university courses. And if we're looking at Close the Gap, as I said, it's going to take 40 years. If those young people that you're actually guiding and molding and teaching them Aboriginal perspectives and ways of looking at Aboriginal people in different ways, they're going to take that through the next 40 years to the jobs and the professions that they're going to end up being in as well. So we do play an important role. I want to again thank everyone for tuning in. Our next guest speaker next month is Nicole Finlay from Reconciliation Victoria, who is coming in and talking. And the one in September is GMA, the Grandmothers Against Removal, that are going to be talking about keeping kids safe in their homes. So once again, guys, I want to say thank you for tuning in. Please look after yourself, look after your families. Go have your dinner, have a glass of wine, do whatever it is you need to relax with. And we'll see you again next month. See you guys. Thank you for joining us.